Well, you want to engineer your rocket to get to the man, so let's go ahead and build it. Okay, get the command pod Mark 1, and we'll do the usual setup for the payload, parachute, and I suggest you put 2 radial parachutes on the side of your command pod, because last time from the orbit tutorial we didn't have enough aero braking to land safely. And now we can put the science on the bottom here. Now, rotate your science junior pod, or you can also known as the materials bay, on the bottom there, so the door is on the other side, because we're going to put a ladder on this side so our Kerbal can get out safely. Now get 2 mysterious goo canisters, put them on the side, and you can, if you want, put a antenna on there, because that means you can transmit science back if you're in career mode or science mode. Now that's our payload. We need to build the lander stage, because you build a rocket in reverse. And the reverse of this is we're going to land, we're going to do our science, and then we're going to land on the man. So we need a stack decoupler, so we can decouple it from our main stage, from our payload. Now get the FLT 200 fuel tank from under there. Now we can go to structural, get the small radio TT38K decoupler, symmetry on 3, and put them on the side of the FLT 200 fuel tank. Now go back to the fuel tanks again and get the FLT 200 fuel tank. Put that on the side there. Now we need a rocket engine, so let's get the LV909 engine, put it in just under the center tank. Will do. And you see, it's giving us 603 meters per second for the lander stage. Now, for the landing stage, we need about 3,300 meters per second. That's not enough, but there's it. So the trick here is to go back to fuel tanks, and hopefully you have the FTX2 external fuel duct. Select that, make sure your symmetry is on 3. Connect it to the outer tank first, and then connect it to the inner tank. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow fuel to flow from the outer tanks to the inner tank. So we're using the fuel on the outer tanks first before we use the fuel in the inner tank. Once these are spent, we can decouple them, and then we still have a full fuel tank in the center one, because these tanks will hopefully help us land, and this center tank will then help us return to the Kerbin safely, hopefully. Now, we still have a few things to do for the lander stage, so go to utility, get the LT1 landing strut, put it on the side as such. And I said also we're going to put a ladder, so still in utility, go to the next page, symmetry 1. What's this called? This is Thales LV Bay Mobility Enhancer. So now put that under the ladder, search. Now, good thing with the 0.90 is you can right click on the parts, allow me, and you can start them off deployed. Now let's do the same with the ladder. You see the ladder's not reaching the bottom or where the lander legs are going to land on the man. So lower the ladder down and place it, and that is perfect. But still, our Kerbal has to jump from the command pod to the ladder. So if you go back one page on utility, you can get the Pegasus Mobility Enhancer and put 2 of them on your rocket here, like so, and your Kerbal should be able to walk down all the way to the surface of the man. Health and safety. Now let's retract all these, because we no longer need them. Out, and last but not least, for the land stage, get some solar panels. I suggest putting 4, just to make sure you have enough electricity, so you don't run out of electricity on your way to the man, and just as you're about to land, and your rocket stops working. That is not good. It happened to me before. Okay, now that the lander stage is complete, we can look at the ascent stage, which we need about 4,500 meters per second to get into orbit. For structural, let's pick our stack decoupler there. Now go to fuel tanks. We'll do our usual setup as we've done in the orbit tutorial. Two FLT 800 fuel tanks and an LVT 45 engine there, which has thrust vectoring so we can steer our rocket. Now that's not going to be enough for us to get into orbit, so go down to structural and put on the TT70 rail deal decouplers. And you need 3, more than plenty. Place them on the side as such. And now we can put fuel tanks on it. Now again, get the FLT 800 fuel tanks. Put some on there and another lot under there as well. Now that's our fuel tanks. Let's line them up as best we can. A bit higher. Oh, that's good enough. Now we need rockets for those engines. Get the LVT30 engine under the outer tanks. And the reason why I've got them, because they don't have thrust vectoring, but they have higher thrust to weight ratio. So they're ideal as liquid fuel boosters. Now still, we're only getting, if you stage these rockets correctly, we're only getting 4,008 meters per second. And that is not enough. We need more, Captain. So go back to the fuel tanks. Get the FTX2 fuel duct. Put it on the outer tanks to the inner tanks. And what this is going to do, this is going to, all these rockets are going to burn the fuel in all these tanks, except the outer tanks are going to feed the inner tank. So once the outer stages are spent, we can jettison them, and we'll still have full fuel in the center rocket tank. And that is good because it gives us a lot more delta V for our mission. And now that is enough for us to get into orbit. All we need to do now is look at the structural integrity. These rockets could fly about and hit our center rocket, which will put a crux in the time mission. Maybe we can kill in Jebediah. So get the EAS for strut connector. Put them on the side of the rocket on the top. Connect them to the inner rocket. And do the same on the bottom. And now they should all be sturdy. Isn't that a beauty? Okay, that's going to get us to the man into orbit and to the man land and return us. Just a few little things. Just get a launch stability enhancer. Now you can put 1 or just 2 on there. But I'm going to put 3 on here because since this is just a tutorial. And make sure we got a pilot in our pilot seat. Yes, Jebediah. So we can use the SAS function. And I think that is all we need. Let's just make sure the staging is correct. Yep. Okay, so they'll decouple the rocket as we launch. Once the outer stages are spent, we can decouple them. Continue on. Once the inner stage is spent and we're in orbit, we can decouple the orbit stage. And then the lander stage can transfer us to the man, land, and once we take off from the man, we can decouple the outer tanks, return to Kerbin and decouple the science payload, and return Jebediah home safely. One hopes. Okay, that is all we need to do. Now let's name it. Let's name it Engineering a Mun lander. Save that, and I'll meet you on the launch pad. Well guys, we're on the launch pad, we're ready to get into orbit. I'm going to fast forward this part of the video because you should have already know how to get into orbit if you're going to land on the man. Okay, I'll see you in orbit. Okay guys, so now we're in orbit. And in near perfectly circular orbit. Well, yeah, it's close enough. Now what we're going to have to do is create a maneuver node. So let's go back into map view. And what you want to do is, the easiest tip is, once the man is over horizon, you can start burning in your prograde vector. So let's try that. As you can see, once you thrust in your prograde vector, the orbit on the other side increases, and that's what we want to do. We want to increase the orbit on the other side of the planet for when the man is going to intercept. So once we're in the on the apoapsis of our orbit here, the man will intercept our point, which we do by here. Oops, a bit too far. Reduce that. Now let's trim our periapsis height of the man encounter. Now I suggest you fiddle with it until you get your perfect orbit. You can adjust the prograde and retrograde vectors on your maneuver node, or you can move the entire maneuver node itself. Now I want to get into a 150 kilometer orbit. I find that the best. That's good enough. So now the maneuver node is set up. All we have to do is line our rocket up, and hopefully you'll have a little bit of fuel left in the previous stage that'll help you get to the man. We're going to have to jettison this, and it's going to be space junk around in orbit of Kerbin, but never mind, this is just a tutorial. You could do things like put separatrons on it, so as soon as we ditch that stage, the separatrons will burn it so it goes back into the atmosphere of Kerbin and burns up safely, reducing the amount of space trash that is left up here. Okay, let's line up and fast forward time to our maneuver node. So this is going to take 40 seconds, but it's going to take a bit longer than that because we have two engines. I think it's going to take almost 2 minutes because it's taking into account the rate of burn this engine burns at, but not this smaller engines, which would take a lot longer to do this maneuver. So let's burn on the 1 minute mark. Press Z to go full thrust. And see, stage, and you see it's going to take us 1 minute 40 odd seconds, so a little under 2 minutes. We can adjust the thrust accordingly. And you see the man's come over the horizon, and all you have to do is burn prograde. It works almost all the time, so if you didn't have the function of maneuver nodes or patch conics, so you haven't upgraded your astronaut complex or your tracking station, then that is the handy thing to do. Just burn prograde as soon as the man comes over the horizon. So now I'm going to complete this maneuver node, and then I'll fast forward to the sphere of influence of the man. Okay guys, here we are, still in time warp. We're coming up on the man encounter, and what this means is that we're going to change from the gravity of the planet Kerbin to the man, the moon, the man. And you see now we've switched over orbits, and that's because the Kerbin's gravity is no longer affecting us. It is just the gravity of the man. So now if we left ourselves on this course, we'll slingshot around the man and go into a very high orbit around Kerbin, and we don't want that, so we'll have to create a maneuver node. I suggest angling the camera as such so you can click on the periapsis and create a maneuver node. So let's add a maneuver, and this time you want to thrust retrograde, and you want to create an orbit that is circular. And you see now the orbit is closed, we're no longer going to escape the man. And just wait for the apoapsis and periapsis to almost switch positions, or if they perm. halfway is a little bit of jiggery and pokery. You can get in the circular orbit. And you see we're a bit lower than 150 kilometers, not too bad. Still, that's good enough for what we need. Let's go and execute this maneuver, and then we can concentrate on landing on the man. And I can talk you through that, hopefully. Okay, now we're in orbit of the man. We can choose our landing site. Now choose carefully, because the man is full of craters and you're inevitably going to land on the edge of a crater or on a very steep slope and tumble down to your Kerbal's death. We don't want that. So what you're going to have to do is choose one of the flattest areas. And I know from experience that this area in this crater, large crater, is flatter the most. It gives you more of the flattest areas, because I know on these it's a bit more slopey. Also, this is lower than most of the other areas, which means that you can use your altimeter if you do not have anything like this mod, which is Kerbal Engineering Redux mod, which gives us a terrain height, so we can judge when we're actually going to hit the terrain. You can also use, if you land in the sunlight, you can use the shadows of your rocket to see how high you are on the shadow, on the man. But you need to be at an angle. And what we're going to do is we're going to land here. So you can either thrust, retrograde, or you can create a maneuver node to say, hey, I'm going to land here. And I'm going to follow that node, and then by the time we come down here, hopefully we can decrease it. Let's increase it a bit more. We can control our descent, so we eventually land somewhere in this crater and hopefully on a flat area. So let's execute this node. Bit of fast forward time. It's only a 6-second burn, so this burn doesn't have to be perfect, by the way. Even though I'm trying to do it perfect. Okay, that's good enough. Let's check the map. Okay. Now what we're going to do is stages of burns now as we're coming down. And since we are... Oh yes, I also forgot. Press F5. Perhaps much more best. The opportune time is when you're in orbit around the man. Or at every stage, once you've done a maneuver, press F5 to save, quick save. That means if you mess up, you can quick load and try again. Because this is about you learning how to play the game. Right, so now we're going to land. Let's deploy our gear. Press G. Or you can deploy them individually. Or I think you have the gear button up here. Okay, now we're going to wait until we're about, I think, 100 kilometers, and we're going to reduce our speed. Okay, now this is the thing you need to follow. Make sure your ship is pointing at your retrograde. This is to reduce your speed. And let's bring it down to 400 meters per second. Let's check map to see what that's done. You see we're going to land over here if we carry on going, or crash at this moment. Now we're going to come down to 50 kilometers. Do the same thing, reduce our speed now to, I suppose, 300 meters per second. Oops. And I'm not following my instructions. And I think I've just burnt this, so we're going to land somewhere over there. So what you can do is kill that, press F9 and load again. Simple as. If you fail something, try again, press F9. But make sure you press F5 to save first. Okay, gear out. And now we're gonna wait until we're about 50 kilometers. No. When we're 100 kilometers, we're gonna drop down to 300 meters per second. Okay, let's thrust up. You can have a look at the map to see what this is doing. Okay, we're within the crater now. That is good. That is what we want. And we can see if we can aim for these flatter areas here with a minimum of craters. So let's get down to 50 kilometers. Again, line up with the retrograde. And thrust up, reducing our speed to 350 meters per second. Looks good. Now we're coming down. We're more aligned with that area which we're planning to land into. This can be a bit of trial and error because it's hard to judge distances or where you're going to land after reducing your speed coming down. NASA would calculate it, but it's hard to do so in a game like this complex. You can download a mod called MechJeb, which will show, it has a handy feature which shows you exactly where you're going to land. Okay, next thing, let's go down to 20 kilometers. And we can reduce our speed down to 200 meters per second. Again, line with retrograde, thrust. And you see as well, our speed increases as we get closer to the man. That's because gravity is accelerating us. So you have to make sure that your speed is down low enough before you come to your optimum landing point. Oh yes, but this time follow your retrograde marker. I wasn't paying attention. Oops. And I've reduced my speed over under 200 meters per second. Never mind. What this has done now is reduced our arc. So we come in almost straight down. So if I go out of map mode, let's zoom in. Once we're over these craters, we can start reducing our sideways motion. Like this. Right, if you see this retrograde, we want that to be on that point. That way, that means we're only coming straight down. So the way to do that is go on the opposite side you want the retrograde marker to go. If you thrust up now, you see that retrograde marker going away from the direction your rocket is pointing. Continue to do that until it's dead center. Now kill the thrust. Point retrograde, so you're going straight down. Are we going to hit the rim of this crater? Hopefully we're not going to have too much of a slope. Now thrust up. I suggest making sure your speed, where we're at, we're 4 kilometers up. So reduce the speed to 40 meters per second. Now we've got a bit of sideways motion, so you can use the nav ball to chase, make sure that you're going directly down, so you're not going sideways. And I think you see that shadow there. Okay. Now continuous thrust is what you need. What you want to do is get your speed down to 5 meters per second. That means you go for a safe landing. So this is a bit of balancing act with the thrust. This is what you need to get used to. Don't worry if you panic at this point, you can always quick load and see we're going sideways. In fact, I think it was going straight up at one point. Yeah, it seems to be if you kill your thrusting at some point, you go straight down. There are probably other YouTubers who are better at landing procedure. And touchdown, kill the rocket. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. We have landed on the Mun. Yes, victory dance. Okay, now you can extend your ladder. You get your Kerbal out. This is what you've come here to do. This is what all this planning has done. Get it into orbit, engineering your Mun lander. Now you can put all the engineering aside and go for the prize. Science! Earn those funds for those contracts that you wanted to get. Be the first to plant a flag. The wrong way round, Jeb. Kerbal Space Program. Ooh, got caps lock on. The engineered Mun lander. Lansner, come on, type properly. Has arrived. And that's it. You have now landed on the Mun. It's not completely it though. Come on, Jeb, let's get a screenshot. Bam. 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 Have we got Kerbin we can put in the background somewhere? Oh, we got the sun up there. Kerbin's not in sight. Very well. Okay, the gravity on the Mun, if we press R to get our fuel pack, is low enough so you can use your jetpack. It's a bit higher, that means you need to sort of stay on your toes and your fuel pack will go down quicker than if you were on something like Minmus, which has a lower gravity. And if you were planning on practicing to landing on a moon, Minmus is the best bet, although it does have the inclination in its orbit, which you're going to have to account for when you're doing the Mun. If you're going to do an intercept like we did for the moon, the rendezvous, which I will get to in our next episode, which will be docking tutorials. It'll show you how to rendezvous with an object which is traveling, and you don't have something like the Mun orbit, something like easy like the Mun to get to. So anyway, let's get our Kerbal back in, because we do have to return. Now, as I said, the outer tanks, they got a little bit of fuel that help us get off the ground. The center tank is full, as I said, because the outer tanks are feeding it. And by the way, you want to do your science. You'd probably do these at different altitudes, and you're probably doing crude ports at different altitudes as you get in orbit. as you're coming down, as you land on the man and everything. Once everything is done, you want to launch. And to launch, you'll want to go on this 90 degree marker at 45 degrees and make sure your apoapsis gets up to about 10 kilometers. So let's go ahead and do that. Keep note, don't forget, 90 degrees is up from the north vector and right. So let main CSs engage, press Z to go full thrust, and point towards 45 degrees on the 90 degree marker. Wait for the apoapsis to get into height. The outer tank should be empty. Yes, let's ditch them so we get extra delta V in our rocket. We're not carrying dead weight around with us. 10 kilometers. Now, where are we in the orbit? We're not going to be able to do a return trajectory straight from here. I'll show you how to do a return to Kerbin on the most efficient. Let's create maneuver node first and get to a 10 kilometer orbit. Now at 10 kilometers, why? Because some of the mountains are at 5 kilometers. So if you're over 5 kilometers in orbit around the man, you're not going to hit any of the mountains. Although I'm not entirely sure what the highest peak of the man is. It may be higher, but the majority of them are no higher than 5 kilometers. So let's get to this maneuver, get into orbit. That looks interesting. I've never travelled. I've gone to the man several times, but I've never decided to go and explore areas like this, caverns and things. I always wondered, can we get extra science from them? Okay. Yep, we're clear of all the height, all the mountains and everything. Okay, now our return trajectory. Now, the best thing to do is fire retrograde to the orbit of the man, and you should reduce your orbit in relation to Kerbin. So if we go ahead and do that, the best way to do that is go in front of the man, create a maneuver node, increase it until you come out of there, and you see we're in a lower orbit. So firing this way is going to reduce our orbit. But there's some funny effects that gravity causes. So if I move this over this way, let's check our periapsis height. And we won't get the lowest, which is there. Now let's increase our thrust. And I suggest for an easy and cheap return, get your Kerbin periapsis down to under 30 kilometers. That way the atmosphere of Kerbin is going to slow you right down, bring your apoapsis all the way down to the planet, and you'll land without having to burn your engine. So the only burn you'll have to do is your turn burn on from the orbit of the man. Now let's go ahead and do that. Line up with the maneuver node and fast forward time. And we can't fast forward over 10 because we're quite low, but there's another good reason why we're low on the planet, because we're traveling so fast around the moon. Then we can make use of the all birth effect, and that means just states that once you're closer to a planet and you're in orbit, you're traveling faster. So the cheapest way, the less thrust required, is to raise your apoapsis higher, or your orbit higher, is to thrust in that direction. And what have we got here? Ah yes, that's another landing I've done. Make sure everything was working correct. I'll look at that Kerbin rise. Anything much more beautiful than that? This is a stunning game, graphics wise and playability wise. And the community for this game is awesome. If you ever need help, don't ask me on my YouTube channel, or you could go to the forums and ask for help there. And I've missed my maneuver note just talking. Don't worry if you missed your maneuver note. What you could do is follow it. Make sure you hit that. Now if I kill that, thrust slowly. $30 kilometers. A little bit lower just in case. And now we're on our return trajectory. And I'm so convinced that this is going to work. I'm going to do something crazy like ditch the rocket. Now we have no control over where this is going to go. We can disengage the SAS. I can fast forward time. You can watch me land. Now please like. That helps me this video out very, very much. It helps it be in the search engine of YouTube. Also, if you want more tutorials, the next tutorial is going to be about get into orbit, rendezvousing with a spacecraft and docking, which can be handy in many ways, especially in saving your Kerbal contract. And comment if you want to see anything else. Tell me how I can improve these tutorials or anything else, or perhaps if you want me to see me do something else in KSP, let me know. I'm open to suggestions. Anyway, I'm Orbiter, so trust me, I'm an engineer. Now let's return to Kerbin.